Good morning and welcome back to the Explicit Measures podcast with Tommy, Seth, and Mike. Hello, everyone. Welcome back.
Happy Tuesday, gentlemen. Happy Tuesday.
It is a Tuesday.
And happy Tuesday to you, Seth.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, in lieu of this week, I believe the previous week, last week, we just finished off a Microsoft Power Platform conference out of Las Vegas. I don't think any of us went. We were kind of still all working, and that's a bit of a marketing event, or has turned into a bit of a marketing event these days. But there were some actually interesting announcements that have come out from the event. I saw some things on Twitter. I saw a couple people making some notes here. Anything that stood out to you, gentlemen? Seth, anything that stood out to you?
Dark mode. Now, listen, there's a long-standing argument, like there is in many places. Some people like the dark mode, some people don't, especially in a visualization tool, right, with all the colors and things like that. Listen, it's developer mode, right? Like when you're finish, and polished and ready to go, you're gonna either flip out of dark mode or validate the report in some other way, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm a dark mode guy. Like, man, all of the applications, dark mode. It's just easier on the eyes. It's nicer to work with. So super excited that they're pulling that in to a tool that is pretty much always on my screen anyway, as the only white one, the like giant blaring screen of white.
Very bright.
That's my opinion. Tommy must have a different opinion.
Well, listen, Mike, what do you use for Tableau Editor? Do you use the dark mode or do you use the normal like Visual Studio 2005 style?
I think I use the darker mode in Tableau Editor. I think that's actually the default on my computer. Like you can set your windows to say, which mode do you like? And I think even on my computer, everything's in dark mode already.
So I actually use the lighter mode. You would think the dark mode would be the preference because I'm the same. Every tool or platform or system that I use on my computer is dark mode. But you're right. When it comes to the data viz, maybe I'm just so used to, which is a terrible excuse, but maybe I'm just so used to everything always being the white bright with every data tool that I use. I don't know. We'll see how it looks.
I just think it's a bit intense. Like the white is just very bright. I think in my older eyes, I like the darker contrast between the white and the dark lights of things.
We really having some golden nuggets on this podcast so far.
Hey, this is the opener, man.
I use it. Most of my other programs are in dark mode though, like VS Code.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Pretty much everything else where there's a lot of text or reading things is usually in dark mode. One thing that I don't design a lot of is reports with like a dark mode on them. That's been something that I like the look of those dashboards and reports, like white text on a dark background and those kind of things. But there's not a lot. It's much harder to stylize those things because there's so many things or features and sets and properties to adjust inside the theme file. And if you miss one of them, you can't see the text. So there's a lot more customization thing that needs to be required to actually make a report that is dark.
How many clients have you given a dark report to? Like a dark theme?
That's actually a good that's a good question, but
not many.
Yeah,
maybe one.
Yeah,
it's really hard to create. I'm not advocating for developing reports in dark mode. I'm advocating for the developer experience to be but it like, and you're right, Tommy, like everything we've done visualization wise, like it could not work. I don't know, but I do know that I love dark mode and all the other applications. So why should this be any different?
Yeah.
But yeah, like creating a report in a dark theme is probably one of the more challenging things to do on a visual side.
Yeah,
I'd say so. Getting that dialed in just right. The colors I think change slightly, and you've got to pick different colors. Yeah, I think it takes a bit more of a designed eye. If I am building reports that are in a dark mode, I'm definitely going to hunt off of the internet of who's got reports that look good in dark mode, and I'm kind of using that as a baseline for where I design and build things from. I'm not as good as picking up my own, out of my head ideas or designs. Actually, I'm not really good at that at all. I'm actually really good at copying things. I'm actually not really good at creating things from scratch. So I know what I like and can find things that I like. That's actually how one of the main backgrounds or the downloads you can get from Power BI tips is Sunset. This one called Sunset. I literally just found an infographic that had the colors the way were represented on that. I was like, oh, this is really good. And then I basically redesigned the layout and where things needed to fit and how it should lay out on the report pages just from their color palette, and I redesigned as a re-envisioned as a Power BI report. So that's kind of where that came from. But again, I was like an idea that I had, and it's like, oh, that's interesting. I can evolve that.
There are some reports I've had that I was like, there must be a dark mode here. Everything had the dark theme, and then I actually looked. Everything was manual. There was no theme to make it dark. They literally changed every visual for the x-axis, and I was like,
this took
this
so
is
much
cool,
time.
but why? Yeah, so much time.
Yeah.
So,
and one feature that I think is underrated, especially if you're doing things like that, one feature in desktop that's underrated is the paste formatting. I don't think enough people, when I teach people Power BI desktop, it's helpful to show them that there is the paste formatting, because you can. So to your point, Tommy, people aren't really comfortable initially in Power BI desktop going in like, let's just stylize the file, because it's a lot harder. You have to see the visual, you have to see the properties you want to adjust. But what I have found is if you let people stylize one card, you can then go use the format painter and then format paint all those other styled properties onto other visuals, which I do think saves you a good amount of time.
I think they've fixed it with the new theme styling, but I think like sometime last year, whenever I would use that styling paste in creating my own theme before the theme generator, when a lot of it was still in JSON, you would get that pop-up error saying like the color's not defined. Do you ever get that? It's like the worst error in the world. Because it will continue to pop up. You can't save anything. You can barely quit your application. We're going off on a tangent here, but I think that's been alleviated.
Yeah, I think they have since fixed it. The only other announcement I have here that would be maybe worthy of note here is the announcement has been made that on October 2nd, the Power BI OneDrive and SharePoint rollout has begun. So you may start seeing interesting details potentially in your Power BI monitoring tenant, and or you may find users interacting directly with their OneDrive and SharePoint now. So that's actually been officially announced. It was supposed to roll out in October of this year. So the rollout has begun, and you'll start seeing new options there as well.
That actually goes with our offline conversation.
Yeah, Donald brings up a good one. We can't believe we forgot, because our good buddy Will Thompson has his feature out now, the data activator.
That's true. That's out now.
Fabric, right? That's for all you folks out there, that is a new Fabric experience that lets you drive automated alerts and actions from your Fabric data. And so that should be cool. That's in preview.
Tommy, have you been into a Fabric environment recently? Have you gone to look
Since
inside?
Yesterday, no.
Okay. If you go into Fabric, I believe there is a start of a rollout of new icons.
I did see that. The kind of
coloredized icons are now appearing. So we have
something wrong with my browser.
Yeah, right. Is this a bug? What's going on here? So there is. I don't know if the colors mean something yet. I can't quite discern if they're supposed to align to like a line of something. So there's like a green, the little the data flow gen 2, right? It looks like a branching GitHub little icon thing, right? Okay, so that's green now. Notebooks that you find, Spark notebooks, are now green text on a little white background. The lake house has like little blue dots now, so they're kind of trying to change the reports are now an orange or yellowish bar on top of a little item there, and then it feels like the data engineering stuff is like in the green, and then the SQL database stuff is kind of like, or storage of data is like blue, and then they have like reporting, which is kind of orange or reddish looking in color. So it's interesting. I think the colors definitely help for some of the icons. For example, like the lake house. The lake house makes sense. The SQL endpoint and the lake house itself kind of makes sense. However, the data sets, there's no way to see there's any color on there at all. The icon is so stinking small. So I'm still holding out for folders. Still looking for a folder for stuff. cool that you changed the icons, but still
I
need a
still
folder.
have 37 artifacts for one lake house. Please.
I still have only been in Fabric for 1 hour, and I already have a page and a half of icons.
Yeah.
So let's fix that, please.
Well, please continue the color thing. Please bind a color to a concept. I need that.
It is helping. I could definitely think it's much easier to identify what's going on there. There's a little bit of color. All of the gray icons were a little bit I do like the idea that they're kind of changing that a little bit there. But I can still just use folders because there's just too much going on. It's just too many things happening. And you do have the filter option, but still, I kind of don't want that.
I mean, how really, as much as I love data flows, how many data flow staging warehouses do I need in one workspace?
Right?
Because right now I have 7.
All of them.
Yeah.
All of them.
Oh, I remember a while ago on previous podcasts, we were talking about, hey, Michael's trying to use vacuum. Does vacuum work?
Yeah, and you said it wasn't working well for you.
Okay, so Michael learned something. This is I'll come back and let everyone know how dumb I was. So there's 2 operations you use when you're using Lakehouse things, a thing called optimize and the thing called vacuum. An optimize step takes all the files that you may have, all the Parquet files, and says, what's the right grouping of these files? So it tries to bring them together. So if you have, in my example, I had 54,000 small little tiny files, a couple kilobytes in size.
Yeah.
What I did is I ran the optimize. I got down to about 18 files, and I ran it again a second time, and it went down even further, down to just 2 files. So I had only 2 files that it aggregated all the data into. Awesome. So when you run vacuum, the vacuum actually looks at the definition of your Delta table and says, okay, what of the Parquet partitions, what of the 54,000 files can I delete and remove? So I literally ran optimize vacuum in the same day. I knew that the vacuum step required a 7-day window to hold onto the files, but I thought it was 7 days from when the file was created, right? So I had made these files 6 months ago. They just sat there, and then I optimized vacuum, expecting them to leave because the file was created 6 months ago. I'm like, oh, well, that's easily 7 days old. It should disappear. Not true. It deletes the files as of the vacuum date. So when you run the vacuum step, the day that you do the vacuum on, it says, okay, these files are marked for deletion. They could be removed. And then when you run the vacuum step later on, 7 days after you've run your initial vacuum, it will then go back through and say, oh, I now recognize all these files are now older as of the vacuum date. I can now remove them. So this is, to me, this in my mind is the pattern of you need to regularly run the vacuum steps multiple times in order for it to mark the files for deletion. And then at 7 days after that moment, it then removes the files. So it's pretty technical explanation what's going on there. I didn't understand it was not when the file was created. It was the day the file was marked for deletion. So FYI about that.
So so you've to seed the vacuum steps.
Yes,
basically.
you're
basically like,
yes.
I want to run this.
Correct.
And even if you would run it daily, right, what it would do is mark and remove anything 7 days or older.
Correct. Yes, and that was as of your last vacuum date. So essentially,
good to know,
right? I was just learning again. I don't know how all the little pieces of Spark work and like all the the little commands that work in there, but it does work. It did remove my files eventually, and I am getting lower amounts of storage accounts now that it's actually getting rid of some of these files. So that is helping. I still can't figure out why my storage account is so high. So I gotta start figuring out why my storage account is so much. It's probably these staging data flow things that are out there that I don't know what's. I have a creeping suspicion here that if people start using Fabric and they're not aware of these extra activities, people are going to start going, why on earth are my storage costs so high? Because people are not managing the amount of artifacts or the amount of files that are appearing into their lakehouse. So I think this is a topic that people need to be educated on. Yes, it's really cool. Yes, Delta's awesome. Yes, Delta Lake came out with some really neat features. Oh, and by the way, Chris Webb just came out with a really awesome article around Direct Lake and what it's doing and how fast it refreshes. It also sounds like when you use a data set that's living on top of Delta Lake, when the Delta table changes itself, if it has a revision, it automatically signals to analysis services, hey, I'm different. And AS will then go reload the partitions that it needs. So it's pretty, like, he was showing demos in his little example of, like, within 2 or 3 minutes of you changing the Delta tables, the data set was already refreshed by grabbing new data, which was awesome and incredibly fast for loading data, which I thought was very, very encouraging as well.
No, what I've tested with the direct link, it's really cool. It is still buggy. I don't think it's still something we should be using in production yet. But the times that it has worked, it is kind of incredible where you feel like it's almost like you're importing the data into like a manual table in Power BI desktop, because it works the same in desktop as it did in service. But that being said, still a few bugs, at least in what we currently have available.
And again, it's getting better, right? It's not going to be perfect day one. Again, I keep looking at this going, man, the business just gets such an amazing tool now. Like, everything that this stuff is doing, dude, I'm really excited for. And now that they're kind of getting closer to releasing things around One Security, which is also kind of dovetailed with the One Lake elements.
Yeah.
Also really, really good. Very excited to see what that's going to come out to as well. So there's some really good parts of this that I think really enable the business user to feel very capable. I still think there's a gap between the existing tools that we have in Azure versus what we, like a data engineer or data scientist. So I'm not quite sure those are there yet, but I think it's definitely closing the gap quickly. They're definitely producing a lot of features that I think in a period of time, this is like metrics, Tommy, right? Metrics came out, I was like, not impressed. Then after about 6 months, a year, right, they really had rounded out the feature, and I was like, okay, I need to take another look at this again because it's actually got some features I think I need. And I think this is going to be the same case, right? It's going to kind of get out initially.
Yeah,
you're like, okay, it's all right. I can see some value here. But then 6 months, a year down the road from now, you're going to be like, okay, wow, this is much more capable than I was expecting initially.
I think we've talked about this where, since we no longer have CD-ROMs that download and install software, companies, and especially companies like Microsoft, don't have to like release something fully gold ready, a platinum ready to go with install, where it can come out with bugs because they can update it at any time. But I think Michael here, third person Michael's trying to avoid the topic for today because this is going to be his favorite topic.
Oh my gosh. All right. Well, let's get into our actual topic, because there's a million things happening. I could go on and on for other things as well. But anyways, let's get to the main topic today. Seth, this is a mailbag today. You are our mailbag voice. Go ahead and
it is a mailbag.
Read us our mailbag for today, and we'll get into our main topic.
I will. Hang on. It's a little longer, but we don't want to stifle the mailbag entries, right?
No.
Okay. So, I'll try to read through this as quickly as possible, but the opener is good. I'm the chief cook. Cook.
Good start. Good start.
This is gonna be a good one. I'm the chief cook and bottle washer in IT for Power BI in my subsidiary of my org. I've shown some business users how to integrate live Power BI pages into PowerPoint, and it's really sparked a lot of interest. And I think this could be a very fruitful topic for you three to discuss. Well, thank you. I don't know. Do we have a
no name?
User?
No name.
Thank you, no name. My angle is this. I think the corporation that I work for is probably pretty typical in that PowerPoint is the format for all visual communication at a director level and above. Power BI's role in this up till now has been either screenshots into PowerPoint or data dumps that individuals use to create their own visuals in Excel and then paste into PowerPoint. And no one has wanted to give direct access to Power BI apps to VPs, let alone our group president, because it's too hard. They just want it laid out for them. I think a big part of this is really that directors want to be between the data and the execs so that they can interpret it for them and maybe add some business logic that they're holding a little too close to the vest into the presentation. Kind of the intersection between data culture and tribal knowledge. Some departments are worse than others about this. I think the live Power BI integration into PowerPoint can help break this down a little. First, it means that all the business logic needs to be directly in Power BI, but at the same time, it allows commentary to be inserted in the usual PowerPoint way of bullet points. To that end, I've created some custom reports on existing data sets that are stripped down. No header, no company logo, as those are in the corporate PowerPoint template, and have custom dimensions to fit the space in PowerPoint better. I have them sized so that they take up about 2/3 of the slide, with 1/3 on the right, left, for bullet points. Also, since the embedded Power BI pages are still interactive, I'm trying to sneakily introduce Power BI functionality to the execs to see them, and maybe they'll ask for access to the original report apps themselves. I could go on. Really? Could you? But what do you guys think? Do you like this approach? Do you have any other ideas?
This is an amazing question.
Yes.
And I feel like this is a lot of what I initially hear and read from this one is we have a lot of habits of how we're used to looking at data, how we're used to looking at interacting with data as we build things. So one thing is I like my static data in images dropped into PowerPoint, like no problem. Like that's the way we've been doing this for years. And then all of a sudden Power BI shows up and we're trying to grapple with how does that enable or change some of our data culture? So I have my opinions on this one. I don't think I want to give too many initial opinions yet. I will say this. I don't really love dropping, but the experience of getting Power BI things into PowerPoint is not the easiest ever. They've been doing a much better job recently of letting you export things right out of Power BI into a PowerPoint slide deck, so you can export it directly. But it's always been kind of an interesting, not as smooth as I would like experience. And I'll start there.
Tommy has a quizzical look on his face.
That's where you want to
Segue to
start?
Tommy.
How difficult it is to copy and paste a URL?
No, it's not that, right? So what he's saying here is they want static images. So right now, the pattern is, data culture-wise,
Yeah.
we're going to a report, and I'm literally snipping screenshots and dropping them into a PowerPoint slide deck, right? We don't want interactive data. We want it to be static, and I just need the slides. That way, when we go to our, whatever quarterly, weekly, whatever the review meetings are, when we send out these slides to executives, everyone gets the slides the way they want. And again, this is an executive perspective, right? I don't want to interact with the report. You need to tell me what I need to know, and it's got to be on the slide. I just got to look at it and see it without having to click and drill through and do different things.
Well, I'm trying to or ask a question to you about what you just said. The experience to get data or reports from Power BI into PowerPoint, you said, is not the easiest experience.
So let me ask the question. Let me switch the question around to you. That's my statement.
Okay.
Tommy, when someone asks you, I need to get this report, or I need to make this report into a presentation, or hey, take these, you've got the visuals. Okay, this looks great. We know what the sales are doing. Get it into PowerPoint. What's your way of doing that? How do you do it today?
Yeah. So we go through, we show them the insert Power BI shape or whatever the button is in PowerPoint. We show them, here's your main page. And if you want to filter based on different regions, you can actually add a slide for each.
Okay. So the user of this says, I don't want any filtering. I want a static image of the report in my PowerPoint. That's the requirement. So how do you do that?
That's a requirement, but
it is. But I'm saying that's where they're coming from. So to me, that's like where you have to at least start with where they're at. And then you can incorporate, some extra stuff.
So to me, this is not so much even about the PowerPoint, but it's the idea that Power BI or this new tool is too hard. And we're just using PowerPoint because I'm used to and familiar with it. Just give me the visualization. At the end of the day, they want the data visualization, but Power BI is too hard. That's really, to me, what I'm seeing is the main kind of point of contention here from the executives. It's not so much that they would just want a single slide. It's no, I don't want to touch Power BI because that's IT still. It's that idea.
I don't know if that's the intent of the question.
Well, I think
the way I'm reading this is like, hey, we PowerPoint slides and data, when presented to executive leadership teams, are highly tailored, right? They're revised. They're to present very concise information to the ELT team, right? So does it make sense that people are spending time on PowerPoint slides, and if there's a visual they want added snippet, that's probably the visual, like how you're taking a Power BI visual and putting it in a PowerPoint slide in this ecosystem, right or wrong? But I think his question here, or the person's question, depending on how you look at this, is there seems to be layers here where someone's producing the report, someone else is interpreting it or getting the visual the way they want, snipping it out and putting it in PowerPoint with embellishments or not, right? And the undertone here is that I read is isn't it more valuable to just make sure that the report has all of the things in it that's needed to convey the message? And if that's the case, why not just embed it? That's what I read, because within here also is like people holding things back, right? Now you could take that in two different ways. Like, especially when you're talking about executive leadership, like presentations, one is, yeah, people are holding things back, right? Like they want to cook the number or whatever, but if they're already referencing your visuals off of a report, there's not really anything you're cooking there, right? Like, it is the number. Maybe there's some detail around it that they're adding in the slide. So I like the approach of, hey, yeah, creating a visual that they could easily snap and then have space on the side so that they can add the bullet points. The other part of this that I'd be interested in your guys' thoughts around this is, I could also construe that as owners. These are the owners of the number. They have to tailor it to the message that they're trying to convey, not cook the numbers, but it's part of a larger message of, are we doing well? Are we not doing well? This needs to be on your radar. This doesn't need to be on the radar, because within here is the levels of how much do executives want detail or not want detail. And I think that's part of what is coming through here as well. And you need to be cognizant of in PowerPoint.
And that's one thing I do agree with on kind of the approach the mailbag author put together, where he's shaping or she's shaping the visuals and even the report for PowerPoint. This is no different than demos that I do when it comes to introducing scorecards. Where it's like, you may not build the report the same way you normally would if you want to integrate it with a scorecard. And I see a lot of that makes sense, honestly. And that's actually a great idea, to kind of tailoring certain pages on a report for the sake of a PowerPoint slide. Now,
Yes.
that being said, there's some really neat things you can do with that PowerPoint functionality. I can do focus mode on certain visuals from any visual. So there's a lot more integration than scorecards, but it makes sense because you're trying to introduce the technology in a very slow way, regardless about what data you're communicating. Because that's not really, to me, that's, I don't want to say that's not the issue here, but the real objective here, the real kind of bridge trying to cross, is introducing Power BI to the executives to say, utilize this. I love the idea of building pages that are dedicated solely for the purpose of the end result being into a PowerPoint integration, which makes a lot of sense. So, I mean, to your point, Mike, to your point, Seth, to me, the barrier here is introducing a new technology that someone's not familiar with, and now we're shaping it and we're formatting it in a familiar format.
So if I go back and, yes, I agree with you. I think you're right there, Tommy. And I think there's a lot of this is, from my opinion, is, so I agree kind of with both perspectives here, Seth. I think I really agree, Seth, with your area of, when you're walking in, like, this is where audience, I think, really matters on how you build the report, right? So I think the audience of what you're trying to accomplish influences very much, like, it's good to identify that up earlier in the process and say, is this report an executive report? Is this a report that's going to be coming from an analyst level? Is this a report? So if you're looking at executive level things, right, you may have a scorecard that is just a lot of reds and greens and numbers on the page. And that might be enough to give readings towards the high level of the business. And so when I think about PowerPoint to me is really more about telling that story. What are the series of thoughts I'm going to graphically show, or words I'm going to put down, that we're going to have this consistent story? I also feel like when we look at this from a Power BI side, we have to take that storytelling capability and think about Power BI as the equivalent of the storytelling. Now, up until recently, it was much harder to get static images out of your Power BI slides into PowerPoint. So for example, like this is why I like what Seth was saying earlier, you're crafting the Power BI report like it was a PowerPoint slide deck. For example, what I find in executive level leadership for reports, when they have their slide deck, it's literally the same slide deck every time. Here's the pattern we're going to go through. I'm going to see this chart every single week, and we're going to monitor how we're doing against that chart this time over time. So it's like, here's the cumulative sales for this year comparing to last year. It's like the single chart, and if we look at that chart, we can understand this pattern, and it shows up every week. Now, from an executive standpoint, the report author or the person who's managing the PowerPoint is like adding some context. You're right. There may be some bullet points. There may be some action items. There may be some, here's what we discussed last week versus what we're discussing this week. Where Power BI, I think, falls apart is Power BI is really good at presenting data, but it's a lot less capable as far as presenting like rich text on page that you can easily update and have conversations about as here's my key action items and things. Because I don't want to have to, my opinion here is, as a report author, I don't have to go in and make key actions and deliverables inside a data set or a SharePoint just to get them into the data set so I can load it to the report. There's too much work for that. The ease of just dropping into PowerPoint and just typing out, we're going to do this time. Here's why we're behind. We lost this job or this deal. This is why we're seeing these numbers dip, right? So you're adding more context to the report page that's directly inside PowerPoint. So in my mind here, I'm thinking, build the report, figure out what those visuals are that you're regularly going to use. And I would probably try to merge two things, right? I would start with, here's the Power BI report built as if it was a PowerPoint slide deck. I would give myself areas of white space to be able to go back into PowerPoint and add a text box where I need to. I could export it over and over again. The downside of this is you get a brand new Power BI, you get a brand new PowerPoint slide deck every single time. So like whenever you're exporting from Power BI, you get a brand new slide deck and you don't get to keep data from your previous slide deck and just update things. If you heard in the comment in the mailbag, there was this idea or this concept around, hey, if I go dump data out to Excel, I can have the static visual inside Excel showing up in PowerPoint, and I can just hit refresh this Excel visual. So you can go to Excel, change what you got to change, and just have that one visual appear or update itself for data. I feel like that's more of what we need. Like I want to be able to pluck from this report, here's the visuals I care about. I want them a snapshot in time. Go refresh that visual right now in the PowerPoint slide deck and be done with it. Like don't refresh it as like an image almost, right? Here's my data. I'm going to refresh the visual in the PowerPoint slide deck. It gives me the most recent data, takes the visual, and then flattens it down to like an image. So I don't need a connection to PowerBI.com to get it to work.
You can, in a sense, you can't do that. The functionality is there. I can take any report page or my dedicated one, focus into a certain visual, and that's what shows up in my slide deck is that certain visual that's live connected. No one's the wiser. I'm bridging a knowledge gap.
I'm telling you, I don't want. They don't want it live connected. That's the thing I'm saying.
No one would know. The executives wouldn't know because it's already it's an enlarged view of that certain visual that's already connected.
But does that visual work unless they're signed into PowerBI.com? If they don't have a license, if they don't have Power BI Pro, I don't think that works. It asks you to sign in to see the visual.
If you're already signed into Office at that point, I'm assuming that they're going to be signed into Power BI. That's part of the integration that works incredibly well.
I think this is the friction that we're talking. I think we're fighting against that.
Yeah, but to me, the Excel is an even worse version because you're still connected to some Excel file to update that visual. Why wouldn't you just go to the source, enlarge that visual, and it looks the same? And then if someone wants more information, it's like, oh, by the way, I'm going to bridge the knowledge gap for you. If you want more details about that visual, click here. But it looks the same.
But I think your lens of how you're seeing this is you're coming this as a Power BI developer, knowing how all the tools work. I think when you come at it from an executive standpoint, who's been used to only just getting PowerPoint slide decks and not having to interact with things and just getting static images throughout the report, I think there's, to your point, it appears to be what you're saying there. Yes, you could do it. I think there's an appearance of it's complicated. I just want my static image. Just give me my report that I need every single week. let's not change our existing process. Let's keep it as consistent as possible.
Normally, I wouldn't push back this much, but this one I feel like I have to a bit because I could not disagree more. I can enlarge, focus on a single visual. Nobody knows this is from Power BI.
What are you disagreeing with?
The fact that if I use Power BI, now all of a sudden I'm the Power BI person, I'm not seeing this from an executive view. That I'm not seeing this
So you're pushing that you should be integrating the PowerPoint into the Power BI report.
I'm saying you can solve the solution in an even easier way than trying to do static images and at the same time bridge a knowledge gap.
Because every presentation that shows reporting should be a direct link to Power BI. Because the report.
Don't put words in my mouth. I'm not saying.
What are you saying?
I'm saying the problems that we constantly face where we're doing static images and they're creating new slides but all we want to do is something simple. I just want to see one bar chart or one trending.
Yep.
I can solve that problem without someone from an executive or a manager trying to figure out, wait, where's this connected to, and get that same answer with a refresh that nobody has to worry or know about. There's no configuration done if I help set up that slide.
If you help set up the slide, what if somebody else opens up the file?
If I'm going to assume they're going to already have access. If it's someone I've already given access to, they don't have to sign in.
Yeah, I understand your assumption, but what I'm pushing back a bit is there on your assumption there. Yes, we could make sure that the report author has the capability of adding these admin people into Power BI. Like you could totally do that, right? Not saying you can't have that as an assumption already, but to me, again, based on what they're doing today, that's the first barrier that I see as far as this isn't a new thing. There's this idea or concept that everyone has to have this, so that way when I do focus mode of visual and get a single visual into the slide deck, we now need everyone to be on the same page. And what happens if this ever gets shared with someone who doesn't have access? Right.
And I completely see that. But the other challenge here is we're also trying to adopt Power BI. So in terms of mountains or barriers to climb, this is a small hop in terms of quick training or knowledge. If the goal here too is we're trying to use Power BI and this data culture, stop with the stinking static images, do something that's as simple as this. And if someone asks a question, it's a sentence going, oh, this is just live connected, just sign in here. If someone has complaining about signing in to Microsoft, we've got bigger issues. Again, the goal is here not just to integrate Power BI for the sake of integrating Power BI. We're trying to build this data culture, correct? We're trying to adopt Power BI at the organization.
And so there's a part of me that is like, I think this is contextual, right? Like I think it depends on the presentation, because to Mike's point, there are many slide decks across many areas of the business, and a consistent format for how data is presented is one that you can't argue with. It's the same thing we argue with for reporting. I want a consistent theme. I want a consistent look and feel. Here's how everything looks all the time. Your time should and is limited with executive teams to convey the most important parts about like your area of business. So I do believe that there is a component where snapping an image, like having the same static bar, and all I'm doing is like capturing what that looks like on a monthly basis, because that's the visual that we see that goes along with the highs and lows, whatever, because it's a component to reinforce a point. My state of the business, like this major initiative, whatever the case may be. I think that is a separate thing. Could you build that in a report? Sure, I guess, but it's a summary. It's consolidated. There's going to be a ton of information related to like the bullets and the conversation that happens around it, because it's not necessarily like all going to be laid out in the slide. Versus, I think, focused conversations around a particular area of business that the executive team is very interested in having. There, I think embedding a Power BI report is a fantastic way to have that conversation. Because just for example, like let's say, sales activities on a bi-weekly basis are a huge focus point and the executive leadership team wants you to come in and present like, what are the win losses over, X amount in this time, because these are the like major impact drivers for the organization. A report, I think, would be a fantastic way to display and have that conversation, but it also forces the presenter to be extremely comfortable with the data sets, so that I think somebody in the comments made a comment here, because you can't find yourself in a position, or you don't want to, of not knowing or getting into some rabbit hole that you don't have the answer to. And that requires that the report you're presenting is one that you are extremely familiar with and using all the time. And I just don't think that's the case a lot, right? But I also think this isn't the normal type of presented mode in PowerPoints. Like, I would say 9 times out of 10, they're not going to be that focused conversation where the executive wants to dive into the details that much. And it could be on a higher level. Now, like, those are the, how I would term, like, how this question has been posed, which is there are directors or people that are presenting to executive leadership teams. I don't think this is like a carte blanche, like we don't have any executive leadership dashboards or KPIs or things that they have access to. It's the argument of like, how do we ensure proper information is getting up to the ELT team?
So let me ask you another question about a feature. So if I'm thinking like requirements or features in order to get Power BI visuals into report, right? One of them is refreshing when I need to, would be one of my requirements. So I know you can embed a visual, you can focus mode on visual, and actually the experience is much better than what used to be, right? So they've done a good job improving that portion, getting the visual into the report. How does that visual interact with refreshing? For example, my data set's refreshing every night, right? Mm-hmm. I'm preparing the slide deck on Monday, and then Tuesday comes around. Does the slide stay the same from when I loaded it on Monday? Or does it change and update the data based on the data set as if it was on Tuesday?
So there's actually 2 options that I've actually set up. One, and again, you can tell me if this is too complicated for someone, which again, if we're trying to adopt the technology, I don't see this as too
far of a jump. Yes.
Too far of a jump.
Okay.
There's page level filters that are available in that view, and someone's going, I only want to show last quarter, and the next slide, I want to use the same visual, but this quarter, which I've got in that scenario. So, okay, copy and paste the slide. Just go to this filter pane right here in the slide deck, already in the slide, and just choose Q1 and choose Q2. The data will always refresh. It's a live connection to the report. So you're right. Okay. If I created these slides on Sunday and everything looked good, and then something drastically dropped, the data would change. Yeah. That's definitely something to be cautious of, which rather than a static image, which is kind of the safe bet. But I can easily add that filter pane for someone, which is expands, choose your Q1, choose your Q2. Yep. And that way I'm also every date or every month, I don't have to recreate the slides. I can also just choose a different date, which I would challenge a director. Will go, well, that's easy. Well, I don't have to ask for someone else to create a slide deck. I just have to change this filter for a region rather than getting someone else to send me another visual or another static image. Mm-hmm. Now, if that's too complicated, again, for a director, then there's other training there's on technology and how to use PowerPoint that we have to do that I would challenge. But that's, to your point, that's easily how you set a predefined time regardless of the data refreshes.
Okay. So I'm not disagreeing with you on this one. I'm just making sure there's capability. So I feel like, again, where we're coming from is, and this is something that I think that I've observed is, when I'm talking about executive level reporting, I want that there's still this need, I think, around having that static image just appear, right? Some companies are using that PowerPoint slide as a historical record, right? What was the sales as of this day? Okay, I can go back to that slide, the presentation we had, and say, let's go back and reference that. So to me, that's something that your solution doesn't necessarily solve unless you've pre-thought about it. So I think to your point, there's more thought applied to, you now need to pick data in the visual and have the data set kind of currently living, right? So if you're going to build, a weekly slide deck and you're going to do this for every week to review things, right? You now have to be thinking ahead and say, okay, what will the data come in? What will the visual look like? And how am I going to capture all the data that I need? So that way, over time, to your point, I can just go in, change the filter method, and then the visual just automatically updates. I feel like what I would like to have would be less of that, but more of there's a connection to PowerPoint.com. Okay, I'm going to go connect the visual and say, okay, I'm ready to refresh this visual. Go take this image, go do its job, get the data, and bring it back in as a static image. So it's almost like another like layer on top of this. Again, that's probably very nuanced. I think Microsoft is wise in not letting you do that because they do want you kind of trying to build these, dynamically, always updating. It always has the right information in the slide decks. So that I'll say is a good way of probably solving that problem.
Well, if we want historical visual images, I think my Epson W4 Workforce Pro printer could solve that.
Exactly.
But
right?
but there's the other problem.
I've been in companies where they print everything out too. That's also happened.
What? Yeah, it is Wi-Fi, so it is pretty fancy. But but no, but you there are and I also do understand too. I'm not saying this like if you don't do this, you're behind. The internet goes out and you still have to present something. Oh, guess what? There's no, all of a sudden your images are gone. I get you want that you want that safekeeping, especially when during those meetings.
Yes.
You want that backup of I know what I know. I know what it's going to look like.
Correct.
I don't want anything changed. It God forbid, something actually happens.
Yeah, man.
And I totally get that. That being said, again, like if we're trying to introduce Power BI, especially to the executives, high level dashboards, I don't need them to do drill through. I don't need them to click on anything.
Correct.
But I want them to use the data that we're utilizing as the organization, our corporate level metrics, our certified data sets. There's a point to that. And if we're trying to, again, bridge that knowledge gap, not just in PowerPoint, but what a great avenue for executives.
Okay. So is this your, like, to the other point of that question, right?
Yeah.
He ends with like, hey, do you have any other ideas? Right. And we've been talking about PowerPoint, but how do you break down those barriers or like showcase Power BI? Is it by taking in, ramming it into PowerPoint presentations as a first step, or how, like, what are some methods that are around this that might be more beneficial or useful?
Everybody loves embedding. Everyone loves embedding in SharePoint still. I don't know why, but that's still like a commonality. It's like, well, no, we want to.
Blows my mind.
I know. It's still like almost like it's like Excel than SharePoint. So, but that almost speaks so too that people are just familiar with the technology that they already have or had,
and that's
regardless of
yes and no. I think there's more. Here's where I'm trying to lead with the question, probably in a really poor way. It landed in ambiguous land. I think if I'm thinking about like how this approach is pushing Power BI into a PowerPoint, and I think where I would want to be is executives asking for PowerPoint in Power BI in PowerPoint, right? From the standpoint, like it doesn't sound like there's enough value created yet. Or maybe, to your point, maybe there needs to be an executive level dashboard, right? Is there have you tailored specific reports for ELT so that the ELT understands how valuable Power BI is and the numbers and the insights that they're getting from this rolled up like thing? It's driving conversations, etc. And have you tailored some of the reports for mobile? Because if there's a place for mobile, it would be in KPIs and ELT. Like
executive levels,
always on the move.
Yep.
And if there are the 5 numbers that they care about on a daily basis and they can hit them anywhere, you win. And if you like, this is part of that data culture thing. I think the more you introduce on any level the power of insights and data with Power BI, which can support all of these things, it's just a matter of like, where do you plug in to make it an invaluable part of somebody's daily exercise, right?
Yes.
Then you get to the point where it's, okay, I really appreciate the presentation. I recognize that that's a Power BI bar chart. Why don't you just show me the report, right? Or I like that you're doing that screenshot, but what I'd really like is you to work with so-and-so so that that's part of my daily, right? I want that in my mobile app. I want that, right? So it would drive more of the conversation around making sure all the business logic is in your data sources and in your reports, because there really shouldn't be extra stuff. Like, I'm never presenting something that's like, okay, well, the number is this, but this and this and this and this and this,
Right.
and it's really not that number, right? No,
No,
like
you're
it
always gonna
should be
present.
the number, and
Yeah.
your data in that graph and whatever should be supported 100%, because that's the number,
Well,
Yeah.
right? So I do see that like there's a lot of nuance in here, but overall, like, to me, I wouldn't be driving into PowerPoint so much as driving into like the levels of making invaluable reports, so that everybody starts talking about how they want to ingest data, from where, what's certified, where can they, where can they make sure that what you're presenting aligns with everything else in the business. And the more you invest as an organization in certified data sets, in data quality, in governance, in all of these things, of course directors or VPs or executives on any level are going to be like, well, we're investing in that. I know it's the good stuff. I don't want you presenting your Excel numbers. I want the good stuff. And I know that that's in these reports, right?
It's like you have to create the demand for the reporting. You have to
Right.
show it's the producing the value proposition that just slide decks with images is above and beyond just that. It's our weekly meeting with the slide deck and moving forward through things.
It's funny, Seth, the two amazing points. Imagine the wow factor showing that one bar chart or that one KPI and someone going, this is great. I wish I could see this and our other KPI. You go, you mean this? And you go out of expand view and you have this tailored dashboard. You could take the rest of the year off.
No, but
With
this
that wow
this is
factor.
what I'm saying though. This is what I'm saying. Like, it by creating value, business value and insights, because that's what we're doing, regardless of the tool.
Yep.
You put yourself forward into a position where at some point, when something's being presented or as you're having these conversations and you're like, hey, by the way, did you know we can embed this in your PowerPoint text? Really? You're like, yeah, in the next one, right? Like, I'll embed this. This will be this screen. This will be this blowed out thing, whatever. And then you're coming from a place of, I absolutely know what you're trying to do for me. So even if I get into this clunky, weird experience where I'm now opening the PowerPoint because you're not presenting it and I'm not signed in and I have to sign in, I know why.
Right.
And I'm okay with that, because it's taking me directly where I want to go. It's showing me the data from where it's trusted and coming from, versus just something that's on a slide. But at the same time, like, if it's something that's being presented multiple times over, right? Like, why wouldn't they just access the report?
Right.
Right.
And you get to that, and a big point that you said too is, I think you have to tailor, especially initially, the reporting solutions towards what the PowerPoint's going to be. We've done the same thing with scorecards, where we've literally created reports with the intention that this is the end result of this is going to be the scorecard, and it's just everything on the reports supplementary, if that's the correct word, if I said that correctly,
Yep.
to the scorecard.
It's
Where rather than
Yep.
trying to integrate it the other way, it's like we're going to try to fit a scorecard into a pre-existing report. And the more I think about this too, that tailoring the PowerPoint or tailoring a report, that dashboard, that visual to support a slide or to support a session or a slide deck makes perfect sense, and is what a great bridge into getting people more familiar with Power BI, where every slide, every visual is supporting something already on a pre-existing slide deck, especially from an executive point of view, rather than showing them this giant clunky report where, of course, there's going to be that complication. Of course, there's going to be the more questions than answers. But creating a Power BI report that's pre-existing for an executive level dashboard, that everything's supporting what's already on a slide deck, integrating that high level visual. And then if anyone does have a question about a certain whether it's the static image or that bar chart or that KPI, it's like, well, listen, we can dive into it if we need to. Here's the supporting information. Here's the countries that are supporting that sales figure, that are simply supporting each slide deck. That's a lot of work, but if you're doing this from an executive level point of view and you're trying to bridge that adoption, it almost illogical not to.
I think where I'm going to go on this one is I agree with that point, Tommy, and I definitely think there is a education and or culture shift occurring, right? It is letting people understand the value that you're getting from this is measurable enough to say we're willing to take the jump here. And I think, practical examples of like what's going on here, right? Okay, go to your report. I think there's a partnership between if I was going to approach this, I would start with my strategy would be is let's try to produce the right reports for executives that they can see every day. It's on their mobile devices, right? It's going to take us some time to get there until we actually have like, here's the data embedded on your device every day. It's refreshed. It's good to go. You understand what you're trying to look for and it's repeatable. My initial step is I'm going to start with building my PowerPoint, my Power BI report as if it was the slide deck, right? Mm-hmm. I'm going to build all the style the right way. I'm going to literally look at my slide deck and say, okay, I'm going to step back and say, here's all the pages in my slide deck. How can I replicate them one by one inside Power BI? Now, I might get a little bit creative where I start blending the two together slightly, where I say, okay, there's a large text box here and we're capturing data from the last report and I got to copy it over. So what I may do is I might have a couple slides where I put visuals on the left-hand side of the page and I leave a little bit of white space at the top or the bottom. But I'm thinking through, right? I want static images from this report. And what I'll do is I'll build my 5-10 page Power BI report and just expect that I'm going to dump out the report to images that will be loaded into PowerPoint. Great. That's my starting point. You have an intro slide, you have all your normal slides, you literally build the slide deck as you could see as much as you could inside Power BI. That's my first step. I think my second step, Tommy, is I like your idea around saying, okay, we're now going to add some slides at the end where here's the report page that's interactive, right? So if there are, maybe it's in the appendix, right? Here's the appendix, and there's a couple extra things that are living in there that are more interactive, right? Here's a visual that I can go refresh, and it just gets the newest data, and it's inside the report. So that might be another one where the appendix becomes, I start sneaking more embedded elements of Power BI into the PowerPoint slide. And we see how that goes over, right? If it goes well, great. If I get ribbed for having that extra stuff in the appendix and they're like, I don't like it, then you can take it out, right? So then you don't have to expose that. But I really liked your point, Seth. I think the goal here is we're talking about data and insights that spans further than just a series of slide decks. So if we can understand the need of those executives, we can also have conversations or have other things, right? There may be one or two executives that actually likes this. Maybe you start with them first. Start working with them, say, hey, look, did you know that this all came from something else I've already pre-built? Would you like me just to share you the report? And by the way, you can get it on your iPad, you can get it on your mobile device, whatever. Let's refine what you need to see. And so the idea is you have to use the opinions of other executives. Hey, Tommy's doing this great thing. And maybe he's showing other executives, he's having that relationship there, right? He can leverage that relationship, or she could leverage that relationship and say, here's what I'm doing. I'm getting the data right now. And maybe while you're looking at the slide deck, someone's got a phone up and they're looking at the actual report and going, yeah, this makes sense. And other people are observing that. And then from there, you're able to kind of get that data culture to start moving forward. So I think the end goal for data culture would be is we stop doing slide decks on things and we start focusing more on, let's go to PowerBI.com. Let's look at the reports that are there.
Dang it. That was my ending point.
I'm sorry.
No, it is exactly where I go, right?
Okay.
Like, I would say in final thoughts, each presentation PowerPoint is different, right? Like not everyone is for an embedded case for Power BI.
Correct.
Because more often than not, the higher up you go, those conversations are highly summarized, but very focused on particular areas. So I think Power BI can be a huge benefit to the conversation, but it could also be a huge distraction depending on what type of presentation we're doing. So choose the right place for embedding in PowerPoint. And to Mike's final point, my mind would be push for creating value in other methods, right? With mobile, other ways in which they start interacting and see the value behind the information and insights you're providing, and eventually drive the convo into Power BI away from PowerPoint, right?
Right.
That's the thing, because ultimately, if we're having conversations about data, about ups, downs, whatever, then to Mike's point, like start in a summary slide, man, right? Here's the
Yeah.
high level. And if
Love it.
something's down, I want to know why. Okay, boom, drill into it. Oh, here's this next level. Why is that? That, and that's a fantastic conversation, because the value there is not, oh, I'll bring that next week. No, the value is we got the answer in the meeting and everybody knows it. Now we can all make a decision now instead of having a delay. And that is the most important thing, is, figuring out how to convey enough information, or all of it, to the point where you're leveraging the most strategic area of a business to make a decision. And if you can bring more decisions into a meeting where these people all are, which is probably the most expensive meeting of the day, then you win.
You've got to be efficient.
Especially if something's red, someone better be able to speak to it. And if you could immediately do that. Yeah. And my last point, is it risky to do this? Is it riskier than just static images? Sure it is. I've seen executives who are averse to data run out of rooms in horror if there's too much data in a slide deck. But that being said, these are also the same group of people that you can latch on as potential executive sponsors who have the resources and to give you more budget. If you find an executive sponsor, if you find someone in this room who loves this or wants to learn more about this, guess what? You now have more resources and more firepower towards that adoption.
I like those answers. And I will say this, the experience of embedding visuals is really good. There's a lot of great techniques. I would definitely play with it. Play with embedding visuals, play with embedding images, play with embedding a visual, tweaking it, and then inside. So there's a whole bunch of other features. The frame that they use in PowerPoint is actually quite robust. You can take a visual and you can snap an image of that visual in PowerPoint and get an image out of it. So I'm finding, even now as I'm learning through this and playing with some stuff, like there's a lot of capability for you, and you could do a lot of sneaky things where you have hidden slides that have the actual visuals on them, and then you can like copy them out and go and paste them in. So I do think this is a neat feature. I think more organizations are going to want to ask for, or have already, they're used to PowerPoint. They're going to want to get more Power BI things in them as well. So I think this is an opportunity for many organizations, but I think it's going to be up to the report author thinking through, how do I marry the relationship between Power BI and data and what the slide deck needs to do? You really need to think like, how can I build them both together, knowing that they're two distinct tools. All right. With that, we really appreciate your listenership. We talked way too long, and maybe my intro was too long this morning, but this was a great topic. I think there's a lot of food for thought here around PowerPoint slides and Power BI and where they intersect. If you like this conversation, we really appreciate if you would share this with somebody else. If you have someone else who loves PowerPoint and likes data, maybe please share this with them, and they could give us some other feedback. Write down in the comments if you are listening to this after the fact. Let us know what your thoughts are. Are you doing this? Are you finding success with how you integrate your Power BI and PowerPoint together? And are you also seeing a data culture shift? Anyways, some food for thought, some interesting topic around how this relationship works together. Tommy, where else can you find the podcast?
You can find us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to subscribe and leave a rating. It helps us out a ton. Do you have a question, idea, or topic that you want us to talk about in a future episode? Head over to powerbi.tips/podcast. Leave your name and a great question. And finally, join us live every Tuesday and Thursday, 7:30 a.m. Central, and join the conversation on all of Power BI Tips social media channels.
Wow, that was a really good one. I like that. Good job, Tommy. That was a nice outro there.
Down.
All right. Cheers, everyone. We'll talk to you later.